DNA repair, genetic transformation, edible fats and oils, nutritional biochemistry, nutritional toxicology, and macronutrient deficiencies, vitamin E deficiency, and vitamin E. Dr. Kanuri has authored over 36 research publications in the high-impact international journals. Welcome on stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those kind remarks. I thank Dr. Sundaram for reconnecting with me after 13 years, and I apologize for not being in touch. Probably all of us are involved with our own goals, and I assure you that I have been working on red palm oil. I have not forgotten about it. And unlike all the previous speakers, I come here with a background of work which was done more than 15 years ago on red palm oil, and I have the advantage of standing 15 years later and assessing where we have come, how we have applied it, and how we can take it forward to use it better, because red palm oil, as my title says, is a panacea for vitamin A deficiency. I stand with a heavy heart over here, or I would say with a more realistic approach, unlike myself 15 years ago when I stood here with rose-colored spectacles, hoping that my results would be taken forward and I would be one of the causes for eradication of vitamin A deficiency, which is a major public health problem in most of the developing countries. Till now, all the studies have been skewed towards the problems that afflict the urban affluent society. I would like to tilt the balance back to the population who are out there, millions of children below 6 years of age, pregnant and lactating women who are suffering from vitamin A deficiency and who are waiting for this miracle red palm oil to reach them. I think it would be our responsibility to take it to them, and I hope that I'll have a collective support from this audience to take it further in the future years. So this need not be said, it's obvious. A lot of people have already spoken about this, that oil palm is the world's #1 fruit crop to give a beautiful red palm oil, which is packed with a number of benefits. It has unparalleled productivity. Its uses as an excellent health food product to engine lubricants to cosmetics are wide. Malaysia and Indonesia, as we all know, are the largest producers. A little bit about the advent of oil palm in India. At the end of the 19th century, in the botanical gardens of Calcutta, it was first planted, and the first plantation was raised in a systemic manner in a 40-hectare area of the State Department of Agriculture and under the government of Kerala in the 1960s. Later, in the 1980s, when India was facing a huge crisis of edible oil supply, the Technology Mission on Oil Seeds and Pulses put a concerted effort and constituted a special team, identified 7.96 lakh hectares in 9 states as a potential area. At that stage, we were asked at the National Institute of Nutrition, where I had joined for my PhD, we were asked to conduct the safe edibility studies of red palm oil, which was processed by the regional research laboratories at Kerala, because the senior nutritionists like Dr. Gopalan and Dr. Achaya had insisted that the oil palm production in India should go only for red palm oil production for eradication of vitamin A deficiency. So that was how the whole story started. And the total area now existing under oil palm cultivation is not much. It's only 63,513 hectares. And the total production, sorry to say, is only 0.5 lakh or 50,000 hectares. I mean, 50,000 tons per year. It is too small for producing red palm oil for eradication of vitamin A deficiency, and red palm oil has not seen the light of the day in India too because of commercial viability. Then a National Research Center for Oil Palm was set up in my state, that is Andhra Pradesh, in 1995. They have done a lot and they have taken oil palm forward. The yields are high, fruit bunches are huge, but red palm oil, again to emphasize, has not seen the light of the day. You all know that value addition of red palm oil brings out edible grade red palm oil. I would call it edible grade. This is crude palm oil because we have done studies to show that it is safe for edible purposes. And then you have the deacidified, deodorized red palmoline, which is now called Carotino, which I was highly excited to see in the '96 conference. A huge bottle was set up on the stage. Dr. Yusuf Basiron, Dr. Ong, Dr. Kalyan Sundaram, all of them were shared the excitement with me. Mr. Unithan, I should not forget. And today, I'm so happy to see that Carotino has reached wide in the world. And then isolated carotenoids, tocopherols and tocotrienols, we have all been talking about. And of course, refined palmoline oil, which is widely marketed all over the world. Now, this nutritionally rich red palm oil, again, we all know, contains 500 to 700 micrograms of carotene per gram, a wide range of carotenoids, and 1100 micrograms per gram of tocopherols and tocotrienols. The fatty acid composition remains the same. Now, if you look at the carotenoid content of different sources, red palm oil stands high. Even the highly rich green leafy vegetables and carrots are very small compared to red palm oil. And the benefits of red palm oil, even as a student of nutrition, the first and foremost function of carotenoid, which is there in red palm oil, always was stated as vitamin A deficiency, that they are precursors of vitamin A. But we tend to overlook that first objective and go on to the rest because the rest will cater to the diseases that afflict the urban affluent, and they are more commercially viable. I have no complaint against that because business means commercial viability. But if you want to provide vitamin A sources to the underdeveloped countries, it is not commercially viable. That is something that we should remember in a realistic way. Then first of all, why do we need vitamin A? We know that we need vitamin A for vision and eye health, for normal cell division, for growth and development, for reproduction and fertility, for immune system function, for skin and mucous membrane health. Again, if you look at the other end, for disease alleviation, a number of diseases which are related to free radical induced damage. So if you look at the global scenario of vitamin A deficiency, you see why we are interested from India is the whole country is afflicted with vitamin A deficiency. Large parts of Africa, and then the brown and the light brown tan colored are severe subclinical and moderate subclinical and mild subclinical vitamin A deficiency, which can lead to death of the child. So the consequences are dietary insufficiency causing hidden hunger, poor health due to infections and illnesses like diarrhea, acute respiratory infection and measles, compromised immune functions that increase the risk of morbidity and mortality, impaired cognitive development and growth, reduced reproductive and work capacity and performance, and grave socio-economic consequences. The symptoms are night blindness, which is the least of the problems, xerosis, beat-out spots, corneal ulceration, and keratomalacia leading to complete blindness. The statistics, unfortunately, remain the same. Every decade, we quote the same statistics with only a small dent in the reduction of prevalence. 254 million children worldwide under 5 years of age have clinical, severe or moderate subclinical vitamin A deficiency. 5 to 7% of Indian children suffer from varying degrees of eye disorders. The deficiency varies from 0.3 to 3.6%. India has by far the largest percentage as well as the largest absolute number of vitamin A deficient children, as these bars indicate. Now, if you look at this triangle, on top is 1/4 million children who died due to common diseases. Then you have 500,000 children who go blind due to vitamin A deficiency. The top 1/4, the common diseases are also due to underlying vitamin A deficiency. And this huge 250 million who are at risk of death because of lowered resistance to infections. So the global targets, what are the targets that the organizations are giving themselves. The UN Special Session on Children in 2002 set as one of its goals the elimination of vitamin E deficiency and the consequences by the year 2010. We are in 2013. We are nowhere near achieving this goal. The global strategies that have been used are dietary diversification, supplementation, food fortification, and educational initiatives to promote consumption. All of them have still not reduced the statistics. Now we come to red palm oil. Maybe the answer is oil blends, because if you mix another oil like canola oil, it might bring down the saturated fatty acid levels and keep those people happy who feel that palm oil has too much of saturated fats. But for the vulnerable population, saturated fats will not do any harm, like the children, pregnant, and lactating women. And strategies that could be linked to other public health efforts are immunization programs that include distribution of supplements, diarrhea control programs that enhance vitamin A conservation, and improved sanitation and promotion of breastfeeding. So if you look at dietary diversification, there was a high amount of excitement with the introduction of new crops through biotechnological approaches. I'll just touch upon golden rice briefly. Better cooking and preservation methods, varied diets through nutrition education, and tapping of corporate social responsibility for publicity, better communication of health, nutrition facts, etc. Like, for example, in India, we can tap resources like the Tatas and the Reliance Industries to take it forward. Maybe they could be urged to purchase the red palm oil and distribute it to the vulnerable groups. I would not expect it of the Malaysian industry producing red palm oil and carotenoids, because it is still young, and I'm sure their resources are not vast enough to address this global issue. Maybe they could address it in their own country as a corporate social responsibility. Now, if you look at golden rice, it was the dream of Professor Potricus. It was supposed to bring a ray of light for night blindness, and the science behind it was introducing the genes phytoin synthase or phytoin desaturase along with lycopene, alpha-beta lycopene cyclase to increase the carotenoid content of the starchy endosperm. It was a scientific miracle. They have achieved it. They have moved genes from the biological gene pool to the rice genome. And when they realized it's not commercially viable, they have formed a Golden Rice Humanitarian Board, which facilitates the technology diffusion for making it freely available to the vulnerable countries. And the pros of golden rice were listed out as the first example of transgenic technology for direct benefit to the consumer, a perfect role model for public sector, private sector interactions. It has a great potential to complement existing efforts for combating vitamin A deficiency, and it can still meet the vitamin A requirements of the poorest of the poor. And the cons were that the effects of the transgene products are yet to be assessed. The bioavailability is yet to be assessed. The introduction of the technology may serve as a Trojan horse for the entry of more lucrative GM technologies by large agri-biotech companies. And there were voices against golden rice, which are still very loud, especially in India. In India, GM crops have still, except for BT cotton, BT brinjal has been thrashed down, and I don't see golden rice coming anywhere in the near future. People believe that genetically engineered golden rice is fool's gold. This was Greenpeace statement. They felt that it provides only 8% of the vitamin A needed daily, and an adult has to eat 9 kilograms of cooked rice to satisfy their daily need. They said all that glitters is not gold, the false hope of golden rice. And on the contrary, they said if it is introduced, it encourages a diet based on one staple food. So is this really the answer? Now, briefly, I will go through the data accumulated by me about 15 years ago. We studied only the crude red palm oil. It was found to be nutritionally and toxicologically safe by experiments in rats. We had conducted multi-generation studies. We have also studied the lipid profile and found it is not alarming. It is comparable to groundnut oil and refined palmolene oil. It was also found to lower the HMG-CoA reductase levels in liver mitochondria. And biosafety studies were conducted. Also, Ames mutagenicity test was done in the bacterial system to assess whether repeated heating is resulting in any mutagenic products. All these results were presented all through the 90s in various conferences in Malaysia. I'm just briefly going through them for those who were not there. Then the acceptability is the main hurdle. We have done a lot of studies where we put the oil into various Indian preparations and found that most of them were acceptable in curries, sweets, and savory items. This was by a panel of judges in the National Institute of Nutrition. And then another study by one of my colleagues showed that 100% red palm oil acceptability was not very good, but blends were more acceptable. A 30-70 blend with sunflower oil was found to be more acceptable. And if you look at the stability, they were found, the carotenes in the cooked products were found to be stable. The carotenes in the oil stored on the shelf for a year was found to be stable. Only deep fat frying may not be so advisable because of the high amount of carotenoids, which might result in hydrocarbons. Then these are some other studies by one of my colleagues, where they studied the carotene content of various food products, and percentage retention was shown. Even at 50% destruction, it still provides a high amount of carotene. Then with respect to acrolein formation, I saw a recent study by Abraham et al. Acrolein is present in repeatedly heated oils, and they concluded that a health risk from acrolein is unlikely in heated palm oils or in French fries heated in red palm oil. And with respect to bioavailability, we had conducted some studies in school children. This was a pioneer study. It was reviewed by Nutrition Reviews in 1999. And we have found that red palm oil feeding affords protection up to 6 months by replenishing river stores. So what happened was we gave red palm oil in the form of a small sweet. It's called a laddu in India, 4 grams per day to one group, 8 grams per day to one group. The 4-gram group received half the daily requirement. The 8-gram group received the complete requirement, and the control group had been given vitamin A supplements of 50,000 international units, which is for a quarter of a year. And we found that liver stores were restored, and you do not need to give red palm oil all through the year. If you feed them for 2 months every day with 4 grams of red palm oil, they're protected for 6 months. So January and July, or March and September can be the feeding schedule, and you can keep them healthy. And this was a modified relative dose response assay, which is a better assay for assessing liver stores replenishment. And we found that the DR by R ratio, the decrease in DR by R ratio indicates liver saturation, and this was equal in both red palm oil and vitamin A group. And now, by the time we finished these studies in '96, as I said, Caroteno was released, and this is the treatment that they had published. And this was an excellent cooking oil, and we had a lot of hopes that the countries would buy them. But then, because it's a premium oil, it has gone to the supermarket shelves, and again, it serves the affluent rich. But it's not really ideal for the countries to buy at such a high rate. It may not be commercially viable. I'll come to it later, how we can alleviate this problem. And then once Caroteno was released, they were kind enough to provide some for us. We conducted some studies on humans, adult humans, and we have done a study where we gave them 15 days sunflower oil, 15 days red palm oil, 15 days ghee, and back to 15 days sunflower oil. And results were promising, and the serum lipids were not alarming. They were much better in the red palm oil group. Retinol, tocopherol, and beta-carotene levels were very high. And then another study was conducted to study the interaction of vitamin A and iron, because both go together, both exacerbate each other's infections. And vitamin A is required for iron bioavailability, to increase iron bioavailability. And even in this study, it was a 30 days placebo, 45 days of iron alone, 45 days of red palm oil and iron, 45 days red palm oil, iron, and vitamin C. And of course, the last group, red palm oil, iron, and vitamin C, were found to have highest amounts of hemoglobin, retinol, as well as beta-carotene. Then we tried everything. We tried purifying carotenoids. Dr. Murakoshi is sitting here. We have used his Lions Corporation procedure. And of course, you have gone far ahead. And I've also attempted my hand at biotechnology. I've tried to isolate the phytoin synthase gene from oil palm. I went to Cornell University in 2007, and I isolated this gene, and I was going to clone it. Then I was looking at following the whole golden rice story, and I thought there's no point accumulating data. I have to concentrate my efforts on taking red palm oil further. It is a roundabout way trying to put the gene. The idea came from the Syngenta group, who used the maize phytoin synthase instead of the daffodil phytoin synthase, and increased the carotene content in rice from 1.6 micrograms to 37 micrograms per gram. But then I thought if I clone it, I don't know if there'd be takers, and if I tried to do a transgenic technology, it's too roundabout, it may take 20 years. I don't have that much of service left. The crops already studied for biotechnological improvement at GM tomato with more of carotene, canola, carrot, potato, and rice, sweet potato and rice. They've all been transformed with the gene of phytoin synthase, and the carotene content has increased. But none of them have been commercialized. So the pathway was the same carotenoid biosynthesis pathway. Either the downstream genes can be introduced or the upstream genes can be silenced. Now, our ultimate aim is, in the early 21st century, 500,000 children per year became blind, and 6,000 per day died from vitamin A malnutrition. This could be prevented. Golden rice, they thought, was the answer. Carrots are already being consumed. Amaranth is already being consumed. Now we need to take red palm oil forward. Now look at the global initiatives. There are various agencies like the Global Alliance for Vitamin A, which is an informal partnership between A to Z, the Canadian International Development Agency, Helen Keller International, Micronutrient Initiative, UNICEF, USAID, and the World Bank. Joint GAVA activities coordinated by the Micronutrient Initiative. Vitamin Angels has committed itself to eradicating childhood blindness due to vitamin A deficiency on the planet by the year 2020. Every decade, you keep extending the deadline. You don't meet it, you give yourself another 10 years. Operation 2020 was launched in 2007 and will cover 18 countries. The program gives children 2 high doses of vitamin A and anti-parasitic supplements twice a year for 4 years, which provides children with enough nutrient during their vulnerable years in order to prevent them from going blind and suffering from other life-threatening diseases. In the 1999 International Carotenoid Conference, where MPOPC was kind enough to take me, my rose-colored tint started fading a little when I realized that there was a huge lobby that would prevent red palm oil from entering the market. I need not say more. I think this audience understands. But I don't think we should be scared or intimidated by this lobby. I think the time has come for us to break the barrier. Now, about 75% of the vitamin A required for supplementation by developing countries is supplied by the Micronutrient Initiative. I presented my papers in front of these people in India too. No response. An estimated 1.25 million deaths have been averted in 40 countries since 1998. They say, but then the total prevalence figures do not change. So these combined interventions were ranked by the Copenhagen Consensus 2008 as the world's best development investment. So why not invest in red palm oil? Why not we approach all these agencies? I come back with renewed hope that the Malaysian Palm Oil Council, the Malaysian palm oil industry, and many others who are sitting here, I hope Sherry will be motivated enough to write a book on saving children's lives. I hope Dr. Oz will be motivated enough to present another show on red palm oil to eradicate vitamin E deficiency. Let us make a concerted effort. Science is always optimistic, and so are the scientists. On this note, I end. Thank you. A lot of people to thank. My guide, Dr. Rukmini from National Institute of Nutrition, and as I said, Dr. Ong, Dr. Basiron, Dr. Kalyana Sundaram, and so many others who have inspired me. And I hope that my heavy heart will become lighter after my reconnecting with MPOC, and let us hope to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor